What's Pitt going to do with the quarterback situation? How might they address the offensive line going forward? What's the deal with all the penalties? And yet another season-ending injury for the Panthers as the regular season comes closer to its end. I think those are the 5 things I was going to talk about. Oh, and some new game times announced. We have game times for the final 2 games of the regular season. That's a pretty quick one. We could just get that right out of the way. But, we'll save it for after the intro. A bunch to get to today on the Morning Pit. We'll get your Tuesday going with a lot of Pitt sports talk here on the Morning Pit, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, we had the Pat Narduzzi press conference yesterday. Talked to Narduzzi during his weekly gathering with the media. Talked about the quarterback situation, sort of the state of the team as they roll with this 3-game losing streak into Saturday's contest at Louisville. That game, of course, will kick off at 4 o'clock, and I've already forgotten the time designation for that one. Let me bring up Pitt's official website so I can tell you, or not the time designation, the television assignment. That game will be on ESPN2. And then the Boston College game next week will be a 3 o'clock kickoff, and that game will be on the CW. I don't remember if Pitt had another game on the CW this year, but they finally get it, and that's where you can watch Pitt Boston College in the regular season finale on the CW. Look at that. We've already knocked out one of our topics. We have 5 things to talk about here on the Morning Pit. Well, that was one, the TV assignments. 4 o'clock kickoff this Saturday, 3 o'clock kickoff next Saturday. 2 unconventional start times. Typically I think 3:30 is a little more conventional, noon, 3:30, and then the 7:30 games at night. But here we have a 4 o'clock and a 3 o'clock. What are you going to do? We'll all be watching the games, and of course, we'll be live right after those games end for the Panther-Lair post-game show right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You know what we always ask you to do, like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and that way you won't miss any of our Pitt video content, whether it's these morning Pitt videos every day of the week, our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night. We'll be live tomorrow night after, not after anything, but just at 8:30, me and Jim Hammett will get together and talk a little Pitt sports with you. Look forward to that, as always, and then we'll have our post-game show after these last 2 football games. I think we might have one. I don't know if we're going to do one on Friday after the basketball team play that, LSU. I don't know if we'll do one then, but we'll definitely have one after the football game on Saturday, and then one after the football game next week. We'll get those 2, and it'll be right here. And if you want to make sure you don't miss it, subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com and turn on your notifications. You get an alert sent to your phone every time we go live, and that way you don't miss anything. All right, what's going to happen with the quarterback situation? And we brought this up yesterday, talked about it a little bit on our Monday Thoughts episode of the Morning Pit. And then, of course, had a chance to talk to Pat Narduzzi about it. Narduzzi wouldn't commit to anything, as you might expect. A lot of the decision of Nate Yarnell or Eli Holstein is TBD based on Holstein's status. Holstein was not available for the game against Clemson on Saturday. That's why Yarnell played, and at least for the second half, I think played relatively well. Finished with 350 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Interception just came on the final play of the game, so wasn't really a thing. But it was a thing. They were trying to win the game at that point. But Yarnell played relatively well, probably better than Holstein has played really for the last 4 games before he got hurt in the loss to Virginia. And when he was replaced by Yarnell, who did not play well. Yarnell against Virginia was 4 of 12 with 2 interceptions. So he didn't exactly play well, but I thought he did much better against Clemson. And now there'll be a question probably all week long about who's going to play on Saturday at Louisville. Will it be Yarnell or Holstein? The first thing that has to be determined is whether Holstein will be available. And I'm not really sure about that one. I think Pat Narduzzi certainly said yesterday that that's still up in the air and that no decision can really be made until you know who's available. The bigger question, the hypothetical that I don't think he would actually answer, is if Eli Holstein is available, who you go with. Now, the further they get into the week without Holstein being cleared, I think the closer you get to another Nate Yarnell start. If he gets cleared, if Holstein is cleared early in the week, that could make for a very interesting situation and challenging situation, a difficult decision for Pat Narduzzi and Cade Bell to make. Who do you go with? The guy who most recently played pretty well, or the guy who most recently didn't play very well? And that's a decision they're going to have to make, and I don't know what the right answer is there. They're going to have to make their decision based on what they see in practice and the film room and all of that. Quite frankly, the easiest way for it all to go down for Pitt is that Holstein's not cleared. Because if Holstein's not available, then you got to go with Nate Yarnell, and then that's it. Well, you had no choice. You didn't have to hurt anybody's feelings. You didn't have to really try and guess on who you think gives you the best chance to win. You could just stick with Yarnell, and you didn't have to worry about it. But we'll see. And it's impossible to predict if Holstein will be available. Pat Narduzzi was asked after the game on Saturday, do you expect Eli to be available? He's like, yeah, I do. But, that was a post-game comment. I'm not putting any stock in that. So we'll see. We'll see as the week progresses if Holstein's available and how that impacts the decision about who plays at quarterback. I think they've got a decent chance to win at Louisville. I know they're like a touchdown underdog, but I look at how they played against Clemson, particularly in the second half, but defensively for pretty much the whole game, with just a couple of exceptions. I think they played really, really well defensively, and the offense kind of came alive in the second half. The 3 scoring drives in the fourth quarter, really the biggest problem was that they, kicked 2 field goals and scored 1 touchdown as opposed, like we talked about yesterday. If you take those 3 scoring drives and it's 2 touchdowns and a field goal instead of 2 field goals and a touchdown, then they probably win, because at the end of the game then, even after giving up a 50-yard run to Cade Klubnik, at the end of the game, they're playing for a field goal to win, not a touchdown to win. Now, maybe Clemson defends it differently. Who knows if Pitt drives, blah, blah, blah. But that was the biggest flaw with the offense. Otherwise, they played really well. Now, that's a big flaw. If you can't turn field goals into if you settle for field goals more often than not, it's probably going to cost you unless you have the Steelers' defense. And Pitt's defense, while I think it's pretty good, is not quite T.J. Watt et al. So you can't really get away with that. You've got to end in the end zone. You've got to score touchdowns, which is really where they fell short in the second half on Saturday against Clemson. But I think there was a lot that was encouraging. I think there was a lot to like, and I think there was a lot that they can build on. And if they can build on some of those things they did in the second half, where the offense looked like it looked in the first 5 games of the season, then I absolutely think they can go down to Louisville and win. They'll sell out to stop the run with Isaac Brown, the sensational freshman running back that the Cardinals have. Jeff Brom will try to beat them through the air, and we'll see who wins that matchup. Remember, Pitt beat Louisville last year with a lesser Pitt team and a better Louisville team in 2023. But we'll see. I think Nate Yarnell can win at Louisville. I think Eli Holstein can too if he's healthy and available, and that remains to be seen. Of course, one of the big question marks will be up front and what they do along the offensive line. We saw a new offensive line combination. I had written it down, the different O-line combinations, and wait, is this the paper that had it? Nope, can't find my paper. I had written it down on one of these white sheets of paper. But I don't seem to have that paper available. But I believe they have 5 starting offensive line combinations they've used so far this season. The most recent one, it might be 6 even. But the most recent starting offensive line combination was in the Clemson game when they started Ryan Baer at left tackle, Jason Collier at left guard, Lyndon Cooper at center, and B.J. Williams at right guard, and then Jackson Brown at right tackle, the third starting right tackle this season, following Baer, who started there for most of the season before moving to left tackle last week for the Virginia game when they put Isaiah Montgomery, the redshirt freshman, in for his first career start at right tackle. So there's really been it's not a revolving door at right tackle. I think after Branson Taylor was hurt and lost for the season due to injury, they went with Terrence Enos for a game or two, opted to try Ryan Baer out there at left tackle, and that created an opening at right tackle that they had to fill. And they tried Isaiah Montgomery first, and then they went with Jackson Brown. I think that's probably still the position that's up in the air of who they want to use at right tackle, and I think a lot of the decisions will flow out from there. if they decide to go with Montgomery or Brown, or even if they decide, you know what, Bear was probably the best option, or maybe Enos could play over there. Enos has played left tackle and left guard so far this season. I mean, what the hell? Might as well try him at right tackle. There's the right guard position, or excuse me, the left guard position that still needs to be settled. Ryan Jacoby got back into the starting lineup and then was hurt again, so Jason Collier had to take over. And then there's a question at the center position, too. Lenny Cooper left the Clemson game with an injury and was replaced by Terrence Moore. And so you have a question there. You really – there's B.J. Williams, and you feel good about him. You feel like the right guard position is solidified. But I don't know if any other spot on the offensive line is really solidified, given all the questions about, in the case of right tackle, the level of play you're getting, and in the case of left guard and center, the health status of the players that you have available. I don't know. We could see a new starting offensive line combination this week. If Terrence Moore ends up starting, if Lyndon Cooper is not ready to play, then you're going to end up with a new line combination because they haven't had Terrence Moore start a single game this season. I'm guessing they'll stick with Bear at left tackle and just try to find a good option at right tackle. Maybe they ultimately liked Jackson Brown or the potential he showed. Maybe they'll go back to Montgomery. Maybe they'll try a guy like Enos. I really don't know. I think there's a lot of possibilities out there. I don't know what they'll end up doing. I mean, they might as well try like Caleb Holmes, highly touted freshman. Try him at left guard. I don't know. I don't know what the best option is. Nothing they've done this year has really worked all that well. The offensive line has just not been that great. And they took a big step back when they lost Branson Taylor, obviously. And the result, they've just been mixing it up and trying to find something that works. And to this point, they haven't been able to find anything. So I imagine I don't know. I could see them trying again, trying for another change, another shift. I could also see them going with the same five they had last week and seeing if they can get it to work this week. We'll see. In terms of the penalties, and I actually asked Pat Narduzzi about this yesterday with the procedure penalties, how much do you put on the changing personnel when you have new linemen out there, new quarterback? And he said, you said it, I didn't. And then he proceeded to go on and say it. that does have an effect. And I think these numbers are pretty stark. I put this on the message board yesterday at Panther-Lair.com, which, as you can probably gather, most of the stats that I say here on the Morning Pit, I usually offer that sort of prelude of hey, I already put this on the message boards yesterday, so if you were on the boards, you already heard this stat. If you're not on the boards, you had to wait a day to hear it. But so far this season, by my count, Pitt has been called for 17 offensive procedure penalties. Those are false starts, illegal formations, illegal shifts, and delay of game. Delays of game. Then if there's another offensive procedure penalty, too many men on the field, but I don't think they've been called for that. They got called for that once on defense, an illegal substitution when the guy didn't get off the field quick enough. But I don't think they've been called for one of those on offense. So those offensive procedure penalties this season through 10 games, Pitt has been called for 17 offensive procedure penalties. Seems like a lot. Well, this number seems like even more. In the last 2 games, they've been called for 9. So 17 over the course of the 10-game season, but 9 of those 17, more than half, came in the last 2 games. What happened in the last 2 games? You have reshuffled offensive lines in both games. You end up with a quarterback change, semi-permanent quarterback change 2 games ago, where I think the very first play that Nate Yarnell was in, they ended up taking a delay of game penalty. They've had 2 delay of game penalties all season on offense. Both of them have come in the last 2 games, and both with Nate Yarnell at quarterback. They've had 12 false start penalties all season. 5 of those have come in the last 2 games, and they've had 3 illegal shift or illegal formation penalties. 2 of those have come in the last 2 games. So we can all bang our heads off the table and yell about undisciplined teams and the coaches and this and that. And I'm not saying the coaches don't bear responsibility for it. They absolutely do. Pitt had 3 false start penalties on offense against West Virginia, and 2 against Youngstown State. Now those 2 against Youngstown State came in the 4th quarter when they were using their backup offensive line, which maybe makes the point even more. it's not like they were immune to penalties, and certainly we've seen over the last 9 years that this team and this program is not immune to penalties. But when we talk about some of these procedure penalties, these unforced errors that are really a product of focus and to some extent preparation, I don't think it's unimportant to connect the timelines. That you have this huge surge in penalties right around the time you've got all these personnel changes. I don't think that's unconnected. And the numbers, I think, bear it out. Unless it's a wild coincidence that in the last 2 games when they've had 2 different starting offensive line units and multiple injuries in both games, in addition to a semi-permanent quarterback change over the course of those 2 games, I don't think it's coincidence that that timeline syncs up with this timeline where they have 9 procedure penalties over the course of 2 games. More than half of their total of the season. So for the first 8 games, they had 8 procedure penalties. Actually, yeah, 7 false starts and 1 illegal shift in formation. And really, they've had a lot. They were pretty clean. Like, they had 3 false starts against West Virginia. Against Youngstown State, they had 2 false starts and an illegal formation penalty or shift. I forget which one it was. And they had a false start against Carolina, but then they had no procedure penalties against Cal or Syracuse. They also had no procedure penalties against Kent State or Cincinnati. And then they had 1 false start at SMU. So, really nothing against Kent State, Cincinnati, Cal, or Syracuse, and 1 against Carolina and 1 against SMU in terms of procedure penalties. So this is not some huge epidemic that's been plaguing this team all season. I think there are very clear and distinct reasons why these procedure penalties have cropped up in the last 2 weeks, and you can accept that as an explanation, or you can keep yelling about the coaches needing to get the players more disciplined and focused and whatever. And I'm not saying that they don't need more focus. Yeah, you should be able to execute the plays. You should be able to not jump before the ball is snapped. You should be able to line up properly. You should be able to get the play in and get the play off. But I think you should also consider some of those personnel changes. Injury-wise, Pat Narduzzi had an announced yesterday that Jordan Bass, sophomore linebacker, is going to be out for the season. He did not dress for the game against Louisville. Clemson, excuse me. He got hurt against Virginia. He's going to be out for the rest of the season. He's going to have surgery. That's another guy now. I think by my count, it takes the total up to 5 two-deep players. Daniel Carter and Sincere Lee both went down in the Clemson game. They're both going to be out for the season. Bass, like I say, got hurt in the Virginia game. Actually, not 5 guys with season-ending injuries, but 4 if you include Branson Taylor, which why wouldn't we? So Carter, Lee, Bass, and Taylor. And then you throw in Ryan Jacoby, who's been in and out with injuries all season. Eli Holstein, who has missed a game and a half plus a half with an injury. Anthony Johnson hasn't played since the first game of the season, although Pat Narduzzi still has never announced him as being out for the season, even though he's clearly visible on the sideline before the games with a walker. And anybody in the stadium can see that. I'm not giving away state secrets by saying that. But yet he's not been announced as out for the season. Now, everybody has injuries. Everybody has guys out for the season. I mean, this is not unique to Pitt, but adding up again. The linebacker situation is interesting without Bass, though. I noticed, we knew he wasn't playing on Saturday because we saw him in street clothes on the sideline, but they ended up using Braylon Lovelace, getting some reps at that star linebacker position behind Kyle Lewis. That's where Bass had been playing. So you have the starting lineup with Lewis at star linebacker, Brandon George at middle linebacker, Rasheem Biles at money linebacker, and then you had your 3 top backups. Of Braylon Lovelace behind Rasheem Biles, and they almost have kind of alternated a little bit in terms of starts and snaps. Jordan Bass playing behind Lewis at the star linebacker, and then Key Thompson behind Brandon George at middle linebacker. Without Bass, Lovelace took more of those snaps. So there were a handful of times that you saw Lovelace out there playing the star linebacker position. He's pretty good. He seems like he can handle it. But it's disappointing for Jordan Bass. I felt like he was showing improvement every time he was on the field. Not always making the play, but definitely showing athleticism and explosiveness. I mean, he's a really good player, a really good athlete, and he's going to be really good. It's unfortunate he's not going to be able to do it in the final 2 games of this regular season or a bowl game, wherever that may be. So, disappointing news for Jordan Bass. We hope his recovery goes well and surgery goes well and all those things, and hope to see him again out there next year, because I think he's going to be a really good player. And I think as Brandon George and Key Thompson move on, I think you got a lot of ways this can go with the linebackers, with Lewis and Biles and Lovelace and Bass. And throw in, Jeremiah Marcelin coming up behind them, and some of these really good players they signed last year, Marcelin and Cam Lindsey and Davin Bruton. I mean, like, there's good linebackers on this team. We've talked about it a lot. Many times we've talked about it, and you're seeing it with the performance on the field, and I think you see it in the depth. Although the depth gets tested a little bit when you lose a top depth guy in Jordan Bass. So that's kind of the news and notes here on a Tuesday. That quarterback situation, Nate Yarnell picture pops up right on time. That quarterback situation is going to be interesting and one to watch all week long. We'll see what happens there. We'll post the latest that we get on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. It's Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com for all the Pitt sports news you can handle. Pitt football, basketball, and recruiting. And, of course, message boards to talk to other Pitt fans. So make sure you like this video and subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and we will catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.